What kind of music would you write if you knew it would be your last piece? And what music would you play if you knew that you only had a little bit of time left to live? The last decade of the 19th century had just begun, and Johannes Brahms is in Bad Ischl, the place that had become his summer retreat for many years. He could often be found in a cafe with a cigar, sketching bits and pieces of music on staff paper, despite the fact that he insisted that he was retired from his career as a composer. Though Brahms was in the best of health in his old age, and his compositional reputation had already become legendary, his personal world was beginning to fall apart. Around the early 1890s, several of his closest friends passed away, and an unfortunate period of coldness had grown between himself and the woman who had been, for a long time, his closest confidant, Clara Schumann. I sense that, through my manner, not through anything else, I might have deserved the great pain of your turning away from me. But my loving and reverent contemplation of you and him will always shine brightly and warmly. But the ice was beginning to thaw. Clara responded with unexpected generosity. Dear Johannes, let us strike up a more friendly tone towards each other, to which end your beautiful new piano pieces offer the best opportunity if you want it. As any composer to this day would, after being shown even the smallest modicum of excitement from a performer, Brahms responded with a newfound enthusiasm. I'm tempted to copy out a small piano piece for you because I'd like you to know how you get along with it. It is crawling with dissonances. God Almighty, this description will surely whet your appetite. That small piano piece, which Clara would then receive, would become the first intermezzo in Brahms's Klavierstücke, Opus 119. Published in 1893, these were among the final pieces that Brahms wrote for the piano before his death in 1897. This is a set of 4 pieces that is simultaneously devastating and uplifting, a set that seems to understand both the melancholy of mortality while celebrating the joys of a life well lived. A few decades after Brahms's death, the pianist Julius Katchen was born in New Jersey. The son of 2 musicians, he was a prodigious pianist in his youth and also found time to study philosophy in university. Eventually, he settled in Paris, where he found the musical culture far more inspiring than what he identified as an overly competitive, toxically cutthroat American scene. Katchen quickly solidified his reputation as an adventurous virtuoso, one whose interpretations were sophisticated, fiery, and full of life. He could be as playful as he was profound, and his pianism was a marvelous mix of all of his musical influences.
We are the continuation in America, my generation, of the Russian virtuoso tradition. But, strangely enough, because of the war, the influence of the German Jewish refugees was a factor which completely changed the approach. And my generation is this peculiar combination of this German philosophical approach and of the Russian virtuoso. I could have chosen the other path, but I haven't. I've chosen the path of going towards the German school rather than the Russian. And my development has been very consistent in that way over the last 5-6 years.
His friend, the wonderful pianist Garrick Graffman, wrote that being with Julius was like standing in a swiftly flowing river. The enthusiasm, the sheer energy he lavished on whatever caught his fancy inevitably swept his companions along. The force of his excitement affected us all. His inexhaustible playing matched his lifestyle. He was known by his friends to spend up to 12 hours in the practice room, go immediately to the Paris nightlife, socialize the whole night, and somehow manage to be back in the practice room the following morning. And all the while, he still found time to master several languages and spend time on his hobby of collecting Japanese netsukes. As his friend and colleague, the American composer Ned Rorem, once said, it was as if he was living 3 lives in the span of one. To assume that his freak gift for quick mastery was a casual process is to ignore that our gifts in the long run are paid for. and sometimes the price is terrifying. That terrifying price was paid sooner than anyone expected. At the age of just 42, Katchen succumbed to cancer. And in his final years, it was Brahms who he turned to the most. He recorded the complete Brahms piano works, and he was known from going from hospital appointments to recitals dedicated to Brahms's music. And when he played Opus 119, something extraordinary happened. We can hear the reflections of Brahms looking back on his long life, as well as the burning vitality of a pianist who knew his own would be cut short. In it, Brahms's Twilight masterwork becomes Katchen's revolutionary dedication to the things that make life worth living. We don't usually think of Brahms as a revolutionary composer at all, but his later works reveal a man who was quite interested in pushing the boundaries of his instrument, both musically and technically. He subverted the traditional melody and accompaniment relationship. His rhythms became more slippery, phrase structures become artfully imbalanced, and textural transformations become the heart of expression itself. Even a composer as iconoclastic as Schoenberg believed that Brahms was an important figure in turning the tide for music in the 20th century, and I think you can really hear Brahms's influence in his works. And for Julius Katchen, who was, of course, spending most of his time in France, Brahms was rather unconventional repertoire at the time. As Ned Rorem recalled, the French, never known by catholicity of taste for culture beyond their frontiers, found Brahms, at least in the 40s, as novel as Americans found Ives. And while all of Brahms's late piano cycles, 116, 117, 118, reveal his adventurousness, it's in Opus 119 that it reaches its most concise and interconnected manifestation. In Katchen's performance, these revolutionary ideas glow in the dark, lighting up the immense emotion underneath. Katchen begins the work with a haunting, yearning sound that lingers on dissonance, allowing the harmonies to hang in the air waiting for resolve. I can almost hear in this moment that period of coldness that had developed in the late 1880s between Brahms and Clara Schumann. About this opening, Brahms actually wrote to Clara that the little piece is exceptionally melancholic and to be played very slowly is not an understatement. Every bar and every note must sound like a ritardando, as if one wanted to suck melancholy out of each and every one, lustily and with pleasure out of these very dissonances. So although it's incredibly melancholic, it's not a rigor mortis. I'm actually quite struck by the words that Brahms uses. There's kind of a contrast between sucking the dissonance out of every note, but also playing lustily and with pleasure. And I think in Katchen's performance, this contrast really shines. The second movement has a nervous energy and a kind of frenetic motion that feels like quite a contrast to the melancholic and slow character of the preceding work. The B section, however, is only 8 measures long, which is quite short compared to the surrounding A sections. But the drastic change in how the thematic material is treated means that this section carries quite a lot of weight. Whereas before, the melody is rhythmically varied, contrapuntally inflected, and almost texture, here Brahms returns to the traditional distribution of melody in the right hand and harmony in the left hand. He's using the magic of relative major again, but he's also asking us to change how we listen to the theme. we are suddenly grounded in a contrast that feels particularly noticeable when we go back to the A section. And at the end, with the B section now returning like a coda, Katchen brings out the inner voices, ringing the thumb like the sound of a bell in the distance. That voicing is actually one of the trademarks of Katchen's performance of this piece. Throughout, he's often leaning towards the middle register of the instrument, letting the thumbs do most of the singing. And for Brahms, this is actually quite a historically informed way of playing. Brahms would have had the sound of the German-Austrian pianos of the time in his head, instruments with a rich middle register, whereas the upper and lower registers were far less resonant. This also helps explain the complex, weighty textures in the left hand of many of Brahms's piano pieces, which can be problematic on the modern piano. As such, Brahms's instruments influenced his ear. The composer, the Dame Ethel Smith, who knew Brahms in Leipzig, once remarked on this.
And when presently, with what he called his tenor thumb, he lifted some warm, tender passage out of a tangle of sound, the look on his face was a thing one never forgot.
Now, I need to show you something, so follow me to the practice room.
So, Opus 119, number 2, ends in E major.
Watch this. We're going to take a little detour. To one of Brahms's most beloved pieces, Opus 118, number 2, the Intermezzo in A major. And if you love this piece, or you're working on this piece, or you just want to know more about it, you can see Garrick Ohlsson's lesson on the work for free on Tonebase Premium just by clicking the link in the description below. Garrick Ohlsson is one of the legends of piano playing, and it's absolutely amazing to hear his perspectives on Brahms for almost an hour and a half. And while you're over there on Tonebase Premium, you can check out Seymour Bernstein's lesson on the exact same piece. It's wonderful to get more than one perspective. Finally, you can also watch a few hours of Gary Graffman interviews. Gary Graffman, of course, who knew Katchen well, as he talks about his life as a pianist. This is like a portal into the Brahms extended universe, and of course, it's only getting bigger. So be sure to click the link in the description below to get access to this lesson from Tonebase Premium for free.
If there's a most beloved intermezzo or piece, this might be it. It's one that we all love very deeply because of its warmth, nostalgic, gentle warmth and ease, its lyricism, its incredibly expressive intervals. It's gorgeous. It's simply gorgeous. It's a piece you love right from the start.
And by the way, while I have you derailed, let me know what's your favorite individual piece of Opus 116, 117, 118, 119. I would love to hear which of these pieces is kind of the most resonant one for all of you. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. The third intermezzo might just be one of the most unabashedly joyous pieces in all of the late piano cycles of Brahms. I mean, it's in C major, for goodness sakes. Katchen brings out this joyfulness by playing the work in an almost improvisatory manner, allowing little fancies of sound to emerge and inflecting the end of some phrases with a sort of humor. This movement is short, charming, and encore perfect, building on the brief glimmers of hope that we've had in the previous movements. But in the context of the cycle as a whole, there's a certain level of darkness that is underlined throughout. As though Brahms is fighting with himself, and as though it leaves us with an open question going into the fourth movement. Does this story have a happy ending? Well, the answer isn't so simple. When we get to the Rhapsody, we hear how Katchen has been structuring the large form of this piece all along. He unleashes his boldest playing, using a rich orchestral sound that we haven't heard to this point. And I find it quite interesting that here Brahms calls this movement a rhapsody. We've had 3 intermezzos, a title that implies a certain kind of incompleteness. But rhapsody, that has all of the emotion and excitement of a narrative coming to its conclusion. And this movement actually does bring to mind Brahms's very first piano piece, the Opus 4 Scherzo in E-flat minor. The drastic contrasts in Katchen's use of color mean that when we get to the intense modulations present in the later part of the work, we hear the full spectrum of Brahms's emotions at the piano writing this piece. Playing or listening to this moment, it always feels like a roller coaster, the 2 hands flipping on top of each other and the center of gravity changing constantly. We're heading back to E-flat, but the story is not over yet. Several of Brahms's late piano pieces close with a Picardy third, where a minor mode piece unexpectedly resolves with a major chord. But here Brahms does the opposite. The radiant E-flat major of the opening is actually swallowed by its relative minor in the final pages of the Rhapsody. And in Katchen's hands, these final pages are pure abandon mixed with deep emotional integrity.
Virtuosity is in absolute control of one's means. And that is, to me, a necessary and vital, an invaluable ingredient for any concert pianist. If he is able to do anything that he wants with the piano, he has unlimited means of expression at his disposal.
And so Brahms's final piano work ends, ambiguously. It's as though he's saying goodbye to his career, ending in the very same key that he began with. Brahms's end was actually my beginning to his music. The Opus 119 No. 4 was the first piece of Brahms that I ever played. I picked it up when I was in high school, and I didn't know really anything about Brahms at that point. I didn't really know anything about what was going on in his personal life, the coldness with Clara, or anything of what he might have been experiencing. All I knew was that I loved that piece and that playing it filled me with a lot of emotions that seemed to conflict with each other and which I didn't really know how to process at that age. And I think one of the reasons why that piece was such a struggle for me to play and to process is because it's so ambivalent. There are so many conflicting ideas and emotions existing within one movement, let alone the whole set. Exactly how one approaches this piece is so incredibly open, and we can really hear that with the wide array of wonderful interpretations that pianists have gifted us throughout history. For example, take Radu Lupu, whose recording might be the inverse of Katchen's, almost the Platonic ideal of how these pieces could be played if we followed the score as closely as possible. The fascinating pianist Maria Yudina brings a totally unorthodox approach to this music, which is ironic given that she herself was extremely devoutly Orthodox. This is a reminder of just how widely performance traditions can vary through time. From the more recent past, Lars Vogt brought a rare warmth and humanity to this music. Like Katchen, his interpretation has the bittersweet weight of someone whose life and career were cut short far too soon. And in Sokolov's 2019 live recording, we hear the wisdom of a pianist who is approaching these works with a lifetime of musicianship behind him, playing them at an age even older than Brahms was when he wrote them. And yet, it's Katchen's recording that I personally always go back to. It's constantly surprising me. It never quite goes where I remember, and I think that's really amazing. And I kind of pick up on something new every single time. And the meeting point of Brahms at the end of his life and Katchen at the end of his is truly a remarkable and quite magical gift that we get to experience. In that same delightfully diabolically fun interview with Ethel Smith about Brahms, she remarks on how Brahms approached the end of his life.
The thought of his last months on earth is a sad one, because of his unwillingness to die. In any case, it is a comfort to believe, as I do, that unlike Mozart and Schubert, when his time came, the best of his work was done. So perhaps nature did well to ring down the curtain.
Julius Katchen, on the other hand, had a whole life ahead of him, still brimming with possibility when this piece became his farewell. Opus 119 is broad enough to carry all of these life experiences and open and inviting enough for each and every one of us to find our own path through this lifetime of brilliant work. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, it is such a pleasure to get to talk about these great works of the repertoire. And I mean, Opus 119 is just, it's beyond words. But let's try to use some in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. What's your favorite movement? What's your favorite set of late Brahms pieces? What's your favorite recording? I mean, as I mentioned before, there are really a lot of incredible interpretations of this work that all seem to say something quite different. I'm also curious what your favorite recording of Katchen's is. Is there a particular piece that you think he really plays just marvelously, besides Opus 119, as we've already discussed? And don't forget to click the link in the description below if you want to get access to a free lesson from the marvelous Garrick Ohlsson on Brahms's Opus 118, the fabulous intermezzo in A major, which everybody loves. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to support what we're doing here on YouTube. I'm Robert Fleitz from Tonebase, and I will see you next time. Now, I need to show you something, so follow me to the practice room. Is the sound effect really necessary? I don't know.